welcome to the Tea and a Butty podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
Today's episode is going to be about Wartime USA. Aren't you excited, everybody? Yes.
I don't know. It's kind of weird to say, oh yes, I'm so excited for this. I'm so excited for war.
Yes, wartime in the USA. No, we're going to be just talking about what it was like in the US during World War II.
Yeah,
mainly.
well, yesterday was December 7th.
Yeah.
A day that will live in infamy.
Yeah, December 7th,
Yeah.
1941.
So yeah, I think it's a good time to talk about this. I can't believe that we've never talked about this before.
I think we've broached the subject, but not
within some
other podcasts.
subject.
Because, I mean, we do that, something jogs our memory.
Oh God, we're notorious for going off topic.
Yeah, I mean, this is on topic now.
Yes.
So, yeah. I mean, Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
Which was the December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor and Oahu. I think you say Oahu.
Oahu,
in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. It was a naval base, and still is a naval base, I think, isn't it?
I don't know if it's in use. I mean,
I think it's a museum.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I've never been to Hawaii. It's on my list, definitely, of places I would like to go.
Yes, Hawaii is so lovely. Everybody wants to go to Hawaii. But, I mean, we're looking at a map here. And, yeah, Hawaii's like, I can see where Hawaii is. Mm. Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Hawaii. Hawaii.
Yeah.
But yes, that was what the turning point in the war for the USA.
Because
up until then,
this is World War II, obviously, that we're talking about.
World War II, everybody.
Because World War II had already been going in Europe since what, 39, wasn't it?
Yeah, late 39.
Yeah,
I mean, the war in Europe anyway. I mean, Britain declared war in 1939 and France, and and that's everything started up until then. But until that time, America was neutral.
Right.
Until 1941. Well, 11th of December 1941. America was neutral.
Yeah.
Officially. I mean, there was still kind of like, assisting Britain in like ways,
Yeah.
But they didn't want to get involved. And I can understand why that was the case, because you've got an unstable economy over here.
Yeah.
Germany's not going to threaten you anytime soon.
Yeah.
And it was Japan who attacked, not Germany. It was because Japan and Hitler, the Nazis, had allied up, and Japan decided, oh yeah, we're going to attack.
I mean, usually the government will act in accordance to whatever the American people want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're not going to have jobs. So to me, that says, I mean, obviously you and I were not around during this time.
No, we weren't.
But to
funnily
me,
enough,
that says that the general feeling amongst, small town America was to not get involved, probably,
Yes.
And to be honest, it's still that way in this country when something is happening elsewhere in the world. Oh, it's not happening over here, so let's just stay out of it.
Yes. In recent times, it's kind of like, oh, that's not the case. People, the rest of the world sees America as this big dominant bully, that comes in and gets involved in conflicts that's got ultimately nothing to do with...
But I think that is more so the government than the American people.
Obviously, that's more... I mean, I don't think someone in Duncan, Oklahoma is sitting there thinking, you know what, we should invade Iraq. You know what, we should get involved in Vietnam.
I mean, the general small town American, I think, has a difficult time understanding the way that things, and I'm talking from people that
I thought you were going to say the way the world works.
No, understanding though the way that things that are happening elsewhere in the world do affect us. because they're not seeing it directly.
Well, yeah, I think that's true of everyone.
Yeah.
Really, in every Western society, even in Britain. You know, someone living in, you know, the small town in Derbyshire is like, why do we need to, you know, get involved in here? Oh, it's got nothing to do with us, you know?
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with us, and it's not affecting me, and, you know, but unfortunately,
the Black Lives Matter movement, let's say, that has taken hold in this country, you know. I have definitely seen small town British people on the internet going like, oh, I'm seeing people over here with Black Lives Matter, and
Black Lives Matter doesn't affect me because I'm white.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Whatever. Oh, that's an American thing, you know.
Yeah.
And that's getting into a different topic, but
well, yeah.
But you know, I think it is difficult, especially if you've never traveled, if you don't know anybody from any other countries. You know, it's easy to just, you know, think of them as just being so far away, and oh, that's for them to deal with. That's not, you know, it's not happening here.
Yes.
And
we got to take care of ourselves and
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. There's the people who say that, though, are also the people going, well, other countries wouldn't exist if it wasn't for us.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, you could say that about anyone, really, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, that's another thing. It's like, we've got to take America first, but America's the greatest. That's another topic entirely, though, which is coming in 2021.
I have to wonder, you know, topics like this really make me wish that I had more time with my grandfather, who did fight in World War II, and your grandfather fought in World War II as well. And
he died about 10 years before I was even born, so.
You know, because I wonder if the feeling
what their outlook was.
No, I wonder how much the feeling was still the same even after America was attacked at Pearl Harbor, because Hawaii is not attached to the contiguous United States.
The continental United States, yeah.
Yeah. So I have a feeling, I suspect, and I mean, obviously you've done most of the research for this podcast, and so I haven't been reading up on this.
Yes, yeah.
You know, prior to us talking about this, but I suspect that even with the attack on Pearl Harbor, there were still people in the continental United States who were just like, that was all the way over there, you know. that was on those islands. Well, yeah. You know, oh, is Hawaii even a state? You know.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I have a feeling it was that, and it was just like, oh, yeah, that was Hawaii, but yeah, they're barely American. You know what I mean?
That wasn't happening in my town.
Yeah.
You know, my town wasn't attacked.
I can sort
but it was a different time back then.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, like the patriotism of today was different to what it was back then. I think it was more real, if I can say that, you know.
Yeah.
Because in 1939, when war erupted in Europe, FDR did a poll. Should we get involved? You know,
right.
He did a poll on Facebook. You know, it's like, Americans, should we get involved in this? Yeah. And a lot of people were like, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to get involved in that. We're okay over here. You know, we don't want to be getting involved in other people's things. And you know, about 94% of people were like, "We'll just remain neutral."
Yeah.
You know, don't side with anyone. You know, over the other.
Mm-hmm.
But it was clear that they were going to side with Britain.
Yeah.
And the Allies.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you know, like, Britain was, like, sending over and saying, oh, feed our boys. In 1941, they were apparently, the ambassador to the US was like, oh, yeah, if you could just, like, eat a little less and give us some more. You know, yeah, they were begging, because, I mean, there was no food, you know, in the UK. You know,
on Thursday, we're going to talk about wartime Britain, so we'll get a little bit more into that.
We'll get a bit more into that, but, I mean, I can imagine people were just like, oh, you know. But the reality of it is, if America had wanted to enter the war in 1939, it was not prepared. It only had the military only had 100,000 men in it.
Oh, yeah.
Without the draft.
Yeah.
And I can imagine how the draft would have gone down over here. And I mean, it did start up. Yeah. But it was kind of like, they didn't want to do that. The economy was stable. The economy, again, entering a war, it's going to be like the economy's just going to be like, oh no, it's going to tank.
I mean, we were just coming out of the Great Depression, weren't we?
Yeah,
so
and
it's
it's
like,
also
oh God,
the World War One as well.
Yeah,
caused a lot of fatalities. You know?
That was a while. That was a while beforehand. But I mean, the Great Depression, especially in rural America, was very hard hitting in this country. I mean, it was
the Dust Bowl, everything like that. Yeah,
yes, the Dust Bowl. So yeah, by the end of the 30s, they were coming out of all of that.
They were coming out of that, and also it was a case of like, another world war, because I mean, they didn't want to join another world war.
Yeah,
and also as I said, the military was ill prepared for it. Mm-hmm. The weapons were outdated. Everything was like ill prepared. Everybody thinks of today like America has this great military with all this, and at the end of World War II, the atomic bomb and everything that obliterated Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. It's like people think, oh yeah, this great inventions and all that stuff, but in reality it wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't that the case in 1939 or 1940. So he had kind of no choice but to remain neutral and just kind of like do the Lend-Lease and all that, which was basically lending stuff to Britain and sending them clapped out old warships and everything,
Yeah. I mean, also, you had the whole situation where Hitler had just been declared Time Magazine's Man of the Year just prior to all of this.
Everyone loved Hitler in 1938, but in 1939 it was like it all went to his head, It was just like...
Yeah, so, I mean, you did have guys over here who heard about the war in Europe and who were enlisting. You definitely had that. Not all Americans were like, who cares what's going on over there?
No, a lot of them were like, okay, well, I'm going to enlist. I'm going to go over there. Yeah.
My grandfather enlisted, actually. They didn't end up sending him for a little while, but he was just stationed in various places around America before they finally sent him over. But I guess training and all of that.
Because people knew it was coming. Yeah. I mean, you look at the map of America, it's like between the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. It seems like it's far away from Europe and it's far away from Russia. Mm-hmm. The rest of the world's separated, Yeah. So it's like people
aside from
get
Canada
isolationist.
Aside from Canada and Mexico.
And Canada at that time was a British
It's our
dominion.
little haven over here, Yeah, no, I can definitely see that,
And Mexico was where most people went to have margaritas and, have a good time and everything, and it wasn't a threat. So it was like, we're having a great time over here, we're growing our own food, we're driving our trucks, we're having the economy's great, we're going to see movies, So life was good. And I mean, life was good in Britain before the war, the Second World War too. I mean, 1930s was this kind of like period of like, the 1920s and 30s was this period of like relative happiness,
Yeah.
But, then rationing happened in the war and everything like that. And it just kind of like these austerity measures, the like of which Britain has never seen since,
Let's talk about, do you have anything in your notes about rationing in the United States?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think a lot of people don't realize that we did have rationing in this country during the war.
Yeah, people think that during the war, I think there's a general consensus of a general feeling that people think during the wartime, even when America entered the war, that everything was business as usual back home. Yeah, and it kind of wasn't. No, it wasn't, because in 1941, the Office of Price Administration warned Americans of potential gasoline, steel, aluminum, and electricity shortages.
Oh, yeah.
So they were warning them, like, we're probably going to have to go to, like, send all the money to our military, And so then rationing became... there was a marked change in behavior over here. People started apparently driving cars less to save on tires, because tires were on ration. Gasoline was rationed, and they were carpooling. There was this famous poster. It's like, oh, if you ride alone, you ride with Hitler, you know.
Oh, really?
Those kind of things. Yeah, I was seeing them. And, you know, the funniest thing is, like, tires being rationed. It's like, oh, yeah, because everyone drives over here.
Yeah.
So it would have just been everyone's driving and wearing the tires down. So it's like, oh, yeah, you know, don't drive as much so you can conserve the rubber.
One thing I always thought was weird, and I'm going to interrupt you for a second. My grandma... Well, she was born in 1930, so she was just a youngster during the war. But she very clearly remembered to me on several occasions, because she grew up in San Antonio, where they have, I think it's called Kelly Air Force Base. Do not quote me on that, but it's one of the biggest Air Force bases in the country. And I never understood at the time when she would tell me this story. Like, what? You know, you're in San Antonio, you're in the middle of the country, you know, you're relatively still far from even the Gulf of Mexico, you know.
Yeah.
But she remembered that they would do, like, blackouts in San Antonio when she was in school. Yeah, they would have blackouts.
It was
guess because of the Air Force base. You know,
electricity shortage, maybe.
Who was going to come attack them? I don't know who they were.
I mean, you know, obviously
but I think it had to do with the base. You know,
had to do with the base, and it was like it was obviously rationing electricity and all that kind of thing.
Well, I think it was because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which was another base. You know, and then they had a very big base there. I think it had to do with that. You know, it was just like a better safe than sorry type drill, but I just always found that so, like, interesting, but also odd that, you know, in San Antonio, Texas, they would be practicing blackout drills. Like, okay, you know, like, oh, nobody can have lights on, and I don't know. Yeah.
And I mean, rationing as well was a thing, but it's because, you know, as you said, you know, Hawaii was far away, and it was a military base, and the Japanese attacked, but really they couldn't get further than Hawaii.
Well,
with their Air Force.
No. That's where kamikaze, where the kamikazes came in to play, because it's just like, they didn't have enough fuel to get back to Japan.
Fighters, level and dive bombers and torpedo bombers and midget submarines and stuff like that were part of the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese military. And they sunk, because I think a lot of, like, the ships were put to sea at the time, so they thought, oh yeah, we're going to wipe out all of the U.S. Navy's
on the
Pacific
attack, during the attack. You mean,
the Japanese thought, oh yeah, we're going to wipe out all of the U.S. Navy's Pacific military fleet in one swoop.
Yeah,
and there was, of the 8 battleships that were present, all were damaged, 4 were sunk, and all but the USS Arizona were later, like, raised from the thing.
I can't remember.
The Arizona's now
Was that because there had been a tip? Or is that just a
That's
conspiracy
what they said in
theory?
That's what they said in Goodnight Sweetheart, you know.
Yeah.
Like, Gary Sparrow tipped them off,
but I think there's some sort of question as to why they weren't there, because I think otherwise they would have been there, you know what I mean?
So there must have been some sort of intelligence at work. It's like, because, you know, the background to that is, like, the Japanese and the US had cordial relations, but tensions were mounting over, like, certain foreign policy, and, you know, because, I mean, Japan was invading China a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were expanding their empire. It was called the Japanese Empire. Emperor Hirohito, I think his name was. Yeah. He was, like, you know, like the big guy, and, you know, it was, like, very warlike. And, I mean, obviously their human rights record was not spotless, to say the least, you know.
Right.
So it was like, they were hungry for war, and they were like, and Hitler was the guy, you know, they were going to ally with, you know, it seems, Mussolini in Italy, you know, all these dictators. So, you know, it was like this world domination, you know, the archetypal Bond villain that Hitler was, making allies with all these crazy people around the world, you know.
Yeah.
So when the Japanese, they sank and damaged 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and a total of 188 US aircraft were destroyed. 2,403 Americans were killed, and 1,178 others were wounded. And this is information from like Wikipedia. I'm getting. So yeah, that was the turning point. Suddenly, those 94% who were like, "Nah, we don't want to get involved," were suddenly like, "Oh, America's been attacked," you know.
Yeah.
It's like, we're gonna go to war, you know. We're gonna enter this war, and we're gonna finish that Hitler, because they declared war. Then Germany declared war, Japan declared war, and then of course the US couldn't say, "Nah, we're not gonna declare war on you." We're just gonna remain neutral still, you know.
Yeah. I have this book though, and I've read before that that was, you know, Hitler made a bunch of mistakes, obviously, but that was
Hitler made some, you know, bad move, Adolf.
But that was one of his biggest mistakes, because he partnered with Japan to attack America, but with really no future plans after that in mind. It was just his ego getting carried away with him. Yeah, attack America. We'll be together in this. And it's just like not thinking about, okay, once America's a big country though, they can rally up a pretty big army if need be, and to get them involved probably isn't a great idea.
I think he allied with Japan because his relationship with Stalin had disintegrated. Yeah. And Russia turned against him, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about this in the early beginnings and all that, because it's kind of a fascinating thing of Hitler, like he was making allies and then losing them.
Yeah.
And having to make other ones. Because, I mean, allying with, Japan, go on, destroy America, you know?
Yeah. And they could only get as far as Hawaii, really, you know? They were never going to get farther than that, really.
I mean, really, they could have, like, potentially with the Navy and stuff attacked
the West Coast. Yeah.
And, I mean, there was actually a fear of bombing on the continental United States. They were going to, like, send, like, through the Gulf Stream, like, hydrogen bombs and stuff like that, and balloons and stuff.
Yeah.
But they weren't really a threat. Like, it wasn't like the Blitz of, like, Germany and Britain and all that kind of thing. You know, it wasn't like aerial bombings and stuff. There was no kind of threat of that, really.
Yeah.
The public weren't concerned.
I mean, really, if Hitler had not screwed over Stalin, you know, if he had not betrayed Stalin, because that's really what, he got Russia on his side, and then he just thought, you know what, I'll have Russia as well. When this is all over, I'll have Russia as well. And of course they found out, and they were just like, what? No.
Well, yeah.
But if he had not done that, I mean, looking at this map again, this map that you guys can't see, but I mean, you could pull one up somewhere, I'm sure. If
Google Maps is pretty good. Not sponsored.
I mean, you know, you've got Alaska up there. I can't remember when Alaska became a state, but it's close enough to get Hitler or the Nazis or whoever down into the United States, right? Russia is not that far.
They'd have to invade Canada. They'd have to...
So if he had kept Russia on his side, though, because the population of Canada is not that big, you know? Not compared to Russia or the United States or whatever. There's a lot of, like, unlivable kind of land mass in Canada. It's a big country.
Yes, largely the middle top of Canada is just unlivable, except for like the indigenous people who've lived there for millennia.
Yeah, you know? But I mean, he could have theoretically come down that way, you know, taken Canada, and then you know, been in America. But, you know.
Yeah, but, you know, things didn't work out for you, Adolf, did they?
That's what happens when you're a madman, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you that's what it is, basically. That's how it started. You know, Hitler became so infatuated with the idea of world domination, he just could not see that... Yeah, you should have...
He started off well, but...
he started off well in the fact that he got Germany out of this depression.
Yeah.
You know, they rose through the ranks. It was like, boom, you know. And the German government probably largely kept to the good bits of his policies.
Yeah.
You know, without the bad bits, you know. It's like he got Germany out of this depression
very bad bits.
very quick. Well, the very bad bits, obviously, very quickly, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to rationing in the US.
Yes.
Sugar was the tires and the gasoline and everything, and then food started coming, and sugar was the first thing to be rationed.
Yeah.
So bakeries and ice cream makers and everything, you know, received about 70% of normal usage on their ration.
Which is still quite a lot, really.
It's still quite a lot. I mean, when you consider America's this big freaking country, it's like the scale of rationing that was happening in Britain was like, you know, terrible, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, it was necessary, but it wasn't really gonna, you know, it wasn't really gonna really affect America that much, you know?
Yeah.
It would have to be like, oh yeah, you can't get anything now, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you have to think like sugar was coming from islands that were closer to America than Britain. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it wasn't
There
as
was a
difficult
supply
for us to
line.
get
Yeah,
it.
there was a bigger supply line.
Yeah.
1942 it officially kind of started rationing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everyone had like a ration book and everything, and you know, went through and stuff. Coffee was rationed nationally. Dog food could no longer be sold in tin cans, and manufacturers switched to dehydrated versions, so they were selling powdered dog food, basically.
Oh, God. The dogs love that.
Yeah, and anyone wishing to purchase a new toothpaste tube, which were then made from metal...
Oh, God, yes.
They had to turn in an empty one.
Oh.
So it was like bringing your glass bottles back if you want a new Coke, you know.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
One thing that came out of rationing in wartime USA was macaroni and cheese.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it was simple and it required less rationing coupons. Kraft sold 50 million boxes during wartime. So that became it was cheap, it was filling, it was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is macaroni and cheese for life, yo. You know?
I'm sure they said exactly like that.
Yeah, they tweeted that out during wartime. It was like macaroni and cheese for life.
What about Spam? Did you read anything about that? Because I think Spam was a thing during the war.
I think that gained popularity in Hawaii, and I think it still is popular over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Spam was popular in Britain.
Yeah.
As well.
I thought it was a wartime
That was
thing.
largely due to American soldiers coming over with Spam, and you know, you couldn't have extra meat.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's something I'll talk about.
It probably had something to do with the fact that it was a meat that kept a while.
Yes,
you know what
it was in a tin.
Yeah.
Tin meat kept for everything, you know. Mm-hmm. But whenever they'd announce, the OPA would announce that something was going to be rationed, what happened? Everyone went out and panic bought it.
Oh, gee. We wouldn't know anything about that in 2020.
Yeah, they bombarded stores to buy up as many of the restricted items as possible, causing shortages.
Jeez.
And of course,
changed.
the black market started up.
Oh yeah.
Like it still is today.
Yeah.
People selling toilet paper on the black market.
Bottled water.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And of course, there was laws against it. So, night courts, they had to set up night courts to stop the spivs, basically, you know.
Yeah.
Also, there was a lot of people, with the gasoline and tire shortage, people, they were saying no sightseeing, no driving around, but people were doing this at night and, they were getting caught.
Oh, yeah.
So they were having to punish them.
Yeah. So, geez, that's so interesting. I mean, the comparisons between wartime America and America in 2020, don't go around, don't visit tourist attractions, kind of stay at home.
Yeah.
Shop for the essentials, but don't overbuy so that there's enough for everybody. And yeah, wow.
They walked and used their bicycles more and increased the use of public transportation.
Mm.
Americans don't really, when they did, they went straight back to it after the war, didn't they? And stuff like the Indy 500 were banned, automobile racing, because of it.
Yeah.
And, there was, of course, gas violations, if you were using so much gas,
Yeah.
You were done for. Also, by June 1942, companies also stopped manufacturing metal office furniture, radios, television sets, phonographs, refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, washing machines, and sewing machines for civilians.
Because they needed all of that kind of stuff for weaponry and stuff, right? Yeah.
And of course, retailers probably welcomed the rationing because, it limited the supply, so people weren't trying to buy everything, running in there and shoving it all in their trolleys or whatever, you know. And, because they were...
Shoving it all in their trolleys.
I mean, I imagine over here people panic bought like crazy. And I mean, consumerism isn't something that's just happened.
No, of course not.
I mean, thanks to the internet, it's largely like happening with convenience now. Everybody's just got, click, I'll have 2 of those TVs. I'll have 4 of those, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, rationing ended in 1947. But by that time, the only thing left on ration was sugar.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a relatively short period.
I didn't really know that sugar, although you said it was like 70%. So, I mean, that, to me, almost feels like not even really rationing, because I know that one of the things that happened was Americans going to Britain and having chocolate and candies and stuff like that to give to the soldiers that were over there.
It was
or the
freely
kids
available.
That were running
yeah,
around
I mean,
at
the end of the day, it wasn't like there was nothing.
But maybe the rationing was for the non-soldiers, and maybe if you were a soldier, like you, you could still have access. Yeah, it was
civilians probably would have been a little bit like, I haven't seen one of them for a while.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But again, it was from 42 to 47, and it's relatively a short period of time when you consider that in Britain rationing began in 1939 and ended in 1954, and even then it was still. Well up until like the 1960s, it was still kind of being felt, really, the effects of it,
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we'll get into that on the next episode, but...
Yes!
I mean, we didn't have in this country, we didn't have to rebuild. We didn't have anything that was needing to be rebuilt, or, anything that was... people's homes were not physically damaged, except for, anybody who lived out at the base in Pearl Harbor and Hawaii. Yeah. And another thing that's not talked about, though, that did happen in this country I'm going to say didn't happen in Britain, but I don't know, actually. So, I mean, I guess we'll find out. But was the internment camps that we had over here after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Yeah. And I do not remember learning about that in school. I think I found out about it years and years later, and I was just shocked. I don't know. Hopefully it's something that they teach in school now.
I think, surely it is,
because it's like, how can you just omit the parts of history that you're not proud of? You know what I mean? Like, that's not teaching.
That doesn't make America look great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same in Britain. They omit the bad bits of the history of the British Empire, or what Britain did during the war to, like, German citizens. Or
I mean, maybe we learned about it in school, but I just do not remember learning about it in school. At least not until, like, much later in school. And I just remember being shocked that something like that could happen in this country. A naive kid
shocked and stunned.
That. Yeah. But anyway, I just thought that was worth a mention. I don't know if anything like that occurred in Britain.
I mean, I don't know if there was, but I'm sure.
I think maybe there was something sort of similar with German. I don't know if they were being held, but if you were German citizens in Britain, you were encouraged to leave.
You were either encouraged to leave, or they were like, you were persecuted.
Yeah.
For it,
You were, like, investigated.
Oh, yeah, and of course the neighbours were like, ooh, he's a spy, ooh, he's on the phone to Hitler every night,
Yeah.
That kind of stuff like that, and it's just like, no, I've lived here since before the war, and, I don't have any ties to Germany, I don't agree with the Nazi party, the end.
We think that this year's been rough. But just having this conversation about wartime, it's just like,
It's bringing it all back home.
I can't imagine. You know what? I can't imagine. There's some things that are sort of similar to things that are happening nowadays, but just the rest of it's just like so much worse. And I cannot, it almost makes you feel lucky for 2020.
20 years from now, we'll be sitting there talking to kids going, 2020. I remember that. I remember COVID. Ooh, that was hard times, that was. No toilet paper anywhere.
Couldn't find no toilet paper anywhere.
Weren't allowed to go out.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I mean, we could talk about this for, forever.
And we will in the next podcast because we'll be talking about wartime in the UK.
Yeah, but we hope you enjoyed this episode. We appreciate you tuning in as always. Thank you so much for your support. It just means absolutely everything to us, you guys. It really does. So thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this episode or any episode you enjoy listening to with your friends and family and helping us spread the word about this podcast. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Talk to you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.